Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, I'm Crystal. I'm a junior double majoring in peace and justice and data science, and I'm thrilled to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Judith S. Goldstein. Dr. Goldstein is a historian devoted to unraveling the ties between post-war European and American histories. She has written many prominent books, such as Inventing Great Neck, Jewish Identity and American Dreams, dissecting immigration and diversity through oral history. But of course, like many of us here, Dr. Goldstein also finds herself traversing multiple disciplines. She sustains a love for landscapes, art, and conservation, but according to her, a little less love for math. Dr. Goldstein is also prominently a human rights leader. In 1997, she stepped up to a challenge. How would you encourage young leaders to resist totalitarian and racist regimes? In response, she decided to put, and I quote, smart American university students to spend 4 weeks with smart Danish university students to try to understand how Denmark was the only European country that effectively protected its Jewish citizens. This was how Dr. Goldstein founded the international educational organization Humanity in Action, an initiative that epitomizes the commitment to fostering youthful leadership in a fragmented world. Over 26 years, the organization has engaged over 2,750 college and university students in its programs and raised over $31 million. And today, Dr. Goldstein will share with us some stories about leadership and what it means to find strength in pluralism. With that, please join me in welcoming Dr. Judith Goldstein.
I'm slightly disappointed because when I got a message asking for some introductory material, I wrote back and I said, I can't do math and I can't spell. And that got lost. So that's a problem. Anyway, I am delighted to be here at the Albright Institute and to share thoughts with you about leadership. I believe the invitation was extended since I was the founder and executive director of Humanity in Action for 27 years. And it's a transatlantic organization for college and university students engaged in sustaining democracy, pluralistic societies, social justice, and human rights, and developing leaders. The historic reference was the fascist German expansionist and racist reign in the 1930s and 1940s, which destroyed all of continental Europe's democracies and their colonial domains throughout the world. The destruction of the colonial domains occurred after the war, but it wouldn't have happened probably without the war. In that global war, the US and Great Britain, the two so-called democracies, liberated other countries. I refer to so-called democracies to recognize Great Britain as a colonial power and America as a country of free states in the north, much of the Midwest and West, in alliance with the oppressive racial states in the South. Over the years, the Humanity in Action sponsored programs, mostly summer programs, in 6 countries, and built a community of over 3,000 fellows. International fellows. The organizing purpose of Humanity in Action was to engage students to resist any reemergence of authoritarian, racist regimes, specifically in Europe and the United States. In the year of its founding, we assumed naively that legality and adherence to the rule of law and constitutions and beliefs in equity in pluralistic and democratic societies, that those beliefs would increasingly define our future. Humanity in Action was not presented as a typical leadership program. We never provided leadership training, although we stated that we were interested in developing leaders on a transatlantic and global scale. For the fellows, the ambitions for leadership and their success in so many instances came from their sense of forming a supportive and challenging community. In groups of 15 to 25 fellows, they worked in 4 weeks to create a community of individuals from very different backgrounds to learn from each other support each other, and share common interests and ambitions. As the fellows gain confidence in the group, they gain confidence and respect individually. Of course, the program didn't work this way for everyone, but for many it had a deep impact and created lasting friendships and the taste and the practice for leadership. The Albright Institute also fosters leadership through diverse community and teamwork. Simply put, leadership and teamwork are skills that reinforce each other. Much has changed over the past 2 decades in America in regard to leadership, and particularly for the leadership aspirations of Humanity in Action Fellows, mainly living in the US and Europe. I know of many who joined the American government to become leaders, working in the State Department, Justice Department, Treasury Department, and international development agencies. They have or had achieved impressive successes. Today, however, so many of them can no longer assume that they will fulfill their expectations as they are out of jobs, fired, or unable in their work to realize their aspirational democratic beliefs. Many who reach positions of leadership previously denied to racial minorities and gender minorities now know that their careers are stunted and possibly ruined. As we think about leadership today, we must recognize that we live in a country where an army of elected and appointed officials reject humanity in action's promises and ideals in regard to the American democracy. At this moment, we are dominated by those who have an insatiable appetite for destruction, cruelty, and control. I do not mean to suggest that we have already left the political, economic, social, and cultural promised land, or that we were living in it, but we are close to the edge. This is a radical departure, despite the fact that undemocratic practices have always existed within American local and state and even national offices, government offices. Many of us assumed that we were immune at the national level from authoritarian leaders using violence, racism, and corruption to gain and sustain power. Toxic leadership and power based on fear, hatred of minorities, women, and violence resides with those who aim to undermine the rule of law and reject modern responsibilities, previously unfulfilled, but conceived as democratic aspirations. They were designed to provide for the welfare of the entire population and not just the favored sectors. Current policies emanating from the White House and Congress reveal beliefs and policies that dictate white, male, Christian leadership and power. This constitutes a political backlash against those who have worked to advance equity in areas of race and religion and gender. The ideology behind MAGA, according to Heather Cox Richardson, and I'm quoting her, amped up by the racism and sexism that identifies MAGA opponents as women, Black Americans, and people of color. In their telling, the world America constructed after the Second World War, and particularly after the 1965 Voting Rights Act, protected Black and brown voting. And that change has destroyed the liberty, in this view, of wealthy men to act without restraint. Free them, the logic goes, and they will make America great again. Sadly, these ideas and policies frequently lead white evangelical Christian women to oppose the empowerment of women outside the home and to ignore the ravages of an increasingly violent society. Cynthia Miller Idris, a professor of sociology at American University, has recently published Man Up, The New Misogyny and the Rise of Violent Extremism. It's an angry book, from an outstanding academic who teaches, writes, and runs a lab that tracks individual and group violence and terrorism in the US and Europe. I'm quoting her, "Violent misogyny, stalking, harassment, and abuse of women, or the LGBTQ+ community, is a constant detail in reports of mass shootings or terrorist attacks, although it is barely acknowledged and even more rarely analyzed." She identifies, and I quote, "a common thread in the virulent defense of traditional patriarchies, showing how gendered social changes are flamed by far-right actors as an existential threat to the nation's way of life in ways that mobilize violence." And let me suggest, sadly, that the death of Renee Nicole Good amplifies that point. So far, I've been speaking about toxic political and cultural national leadership that affects so much of our lives, and particularly yours, as you educate yourself for future work and leadership roles. There are, however, other mechanisms that intersect with leadership that we must contend with. In the past, we relied upon human cognition, imagination, and communications to produce and empower leaders. Benign or destructive, leaders gain power through direct person-to-person conduits and tools of communication, mainly by words and images. And they did this to rule over populations and states and empires. When not directly present, the reach of the leader was passed through religious and secular governing bodies or deputies, and often the two were indistinguishable, and they gained consent from or imposed their will upon their populations. As we speak, the mechanisms for attaining and exercising diverse leadership, particularly diverse leadership, are shaped through accelerated digital and technological changes. And you, I believe, are in the center of the reworking of leadership and power. This is your world. Social media determines winners and losers in the numerous spheres based upon gender, race, and religion. Unquestionably, the universal sphere of social media, based on vast systems of accelerated communications, now influence and often determine the leadership choices we make in politics and commerce, religion and culture, through public and private organizations, and the vast educational world of which you are a part. Influencers, possibly a new iteration of leadership, spin all over the galaxies to make and destroy leaders. Leaders influencers, or influencers leaders, can emerge instantaneously out of nowhere to affect millions of people from classrooms to villages, cities and countries, through the number and rapidity of hits. In the highly developed digital world, influencers communicate nonstop through phones and computers, and possibly other devices of the day which I don't know about. Influencers are in the loop to assert power, to make people feel that they belong, to determine what people think, to affect how they act, and determine what they buy. Influencers are selling a form of community by identifying the latest trends, fashions, products, ideas, and political players. And their influence can make or break leaders. Personal connections, or the appearance of personal connections, surge through the aggregation of followers through text and images, often based on seduction and fear. They are wildly employed as a tactic to gain support for political purposes. An article in the New York Times reported the following news. Quote, Oxford University Press has chosen rage bait, defined as online content deliberately designed to elicit anger or outrage by being frustrating, provocative, or offensive. And that's the 1925 word of the year. One should also not underestimate the deliberate political tactic in the flood of media through what's called the muzzle philosophy. I didn't know what that meant. Apparently, it's a term relating to weapons that describe the speed at which a bullet travels. Muzzle philosophy. The strategy is to overwhelm the public with a rapid, high-volume succession of events and decisions, producing distraction and impotence so that people can't maintain focus and think clearly. Social media creates and takes down leaders with breathtaking rapidity and reach. We naively assume that influencers are real people, and therefore some version of what a leader might be, but that may not always be true. Some influencers claiming leadership are fake. They're fake. They're products using fabricated voices, ideas, and images. So far as I know, none have actually appeared in public at a political rally and asked for votes, or for power, or for leadership. But the current American president uses the media with overkill and skill as to create confusion over reality. The process is enabled and often directed not only from within the US, but from abroad. A report from CBS states, quote, online sleuths and experts found that many popular accounts posting in support of the MAGA movement to thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers are based outside the United States, raising concern about foreign influence in US politics. I am concerned that we, you and I, might be living in such different worlds of experience, habits, and personal and collective interactions, different worlds of responsibilities and possibilities. Beyond the ever-changing mechanics of information and communications, the older generations are thrusting heavy doses of fatalism and despair upon you and upon themselves. Such are the observations from Timothy Snyder, a courageous and wise historian and activist who taught at Yale and now is at the University of Toronto. And I'll quote him, "Consider this. There are, in fact, alien entities that threaten the essence of our civilization. They are undermining education. They do consume our time. They do ruin our relationships. They do separate wives from husbands, children from parents. They polarize our politics. They enter into our very minds, reformatting them, cutting us off from what we once believed, what we once might have remembered. They prepare us for a generic life that is hardly life, separated from the history of what made each culture special and each individual different. They are truly inhuman. These entities, of course, are the algorithms of social media. They are the aliens who are penetrating us and changing us. Social media and AI are now the Siamese twins of the digital world in regard to information and impact. Ask AI to define leadership, and it will produce a cascade of information. Ask AI to take on leadership responsibilities, and it will provide appropriate pathways and directions to succeed. Ask it to choose a path to leadership, how to become a leader, let's say, in a specific field or endeavor, and it will chart the course. Ask it to give leaders emotional support when uncertainty and fear affect decisions and actions to take, and it will provide wise words and consolation. And ask it to make images that clone the sound and look of a figure, or through a figure, and meme, what's the word? Meme. Oh, I'm so out of it. I'm not on social media. This is awful. Anyway, and it will create imaginary lifelike images and actions with no valid human or documentary base. And look to it to perpetuate stereotypes and enable discrimination through large language models. And it will deliver results that prevent societies from becoming more equitable. And ask it to share toxic information that traps children in fantasies of longing and hatred and self-hatred, and it delivers ad nauseum. The British paper The Guardian reported the following: algorithmic processes on TikTok and other social media sites target people's vulnerabilities, such as loneliness or feelings of loss of control, and gamify harmful content. As young people microdose, that's a new word, microdose, on topics like self-harm or extremism, to them it feels like entertainment. Entertainment and deception often in the guise of self-improvement. I recently came across this invitation to enter an AI training program called Depolarization Dojo? D-O-G-O? What's that? Dojo? Okay. Being ignorant, I looked up the meaning of dojo, and the definition is a room or hall in which judo and other martial arts. What is it? Tell me. Dojo. I'm so out of it. So, damn it. Anyway, so the invitation reads as following: this fully functional AI-powered training platform is a safe environment for unlimited practice of constructive dialogue. You can engage with realistic AI persona representing voices from across the political spectrum, receiving real-time coaching using the Braver Angels listening skills to refine your bridge-building chops instantly. This is from Braver Angels. I don't know if you know about Braver Angels, but it's a really good organization. But what a realistic AI persona. Could they enhance the course of leadership interactions and interactions with human beings, or will they engage in a contest pitting an artificial voice against an artificial voice? Will it predict, produce, and acclaim a winner and loser? In the realm of fantasy and imagination, I am a total novice. But can one ask if an AI creature or creation could compete with a human being for leadership in the world that we still regard as the place where human beings interact and make decisions that affect their lives? That world that we may naively and nostalgically still refer to as the real world based on cognition. Will AI make obsolete experiences and sensations which are used for cognition? Wikipedia defines cognition in the following way. It's a long description. I'll just read half of it and you'll get the sense of it. So, cognition encompasses psychological activities like perception, thinking, language processing, and memory. Cognitions are mental activities that deal with knowledge. They encompass psychological processes that acquire, store, retrieve, transform, or apply information. Cognitions are a pervasive part of mental life, helping individuals understand and interact with the world. Cognitive processes are typically categorized by their function. Perception organizes sensory, interpreting physical stimuli, such as light and sound, to construct a coherent experience of objects and events. And it goes on to attention, memory, working memory, long-term memory, thinking, concepts, reasoning, concept information, problem solving, and decision making. And many of you who are taking courses in psychology or sociology, mustn't deal with these concepts all the time. And then there's the final one, which is metacognition, involves knowledge about knowledge, or mental processes that monitor and regulate other mental processes. Will AI make obsolete real personal observations of beauty and the natural world, which add to the mental act of cognition? Calvin Tompkins famous New Yorker art critic, recently reflected on family history, friendships, and sad to say, too many physical changes as he approached his 100th birthday. He's a wonderful writer. Anyway, he published 13 pages of testimonial, but only did he have one-line entry. August 15th, the erratic motion of a yellow butterfly is immune to artificial intelligence. That was it. And he said nothing more to dismiss AI. So let me do something. Okay. Let me return to the subject of leadership, which is why you were here in this terrific 2-week program. When I first thought about the title for this talk, I settled on dimensions of leadership to encompass forces both benign and destructive. We know about both. And then I thought playfully to call the talk Dimensions of Leadership from Moses to Mamdani. So I enjoyed, this slightly bizarre alliteration and fun of connecting two leaders, one from the 2nd century BCE to another leader not yet in full bloom. Moses, we can say with confidence, has a stellar reputation of leadership, recorded in a stellar book called the Bible, or the Old Testament. And his story recounts leading a contentious, frightened people out of a place of bondage to go to the Promised Land. Mamdani, the other leader, is just starting to make his name in one of the world's greatest cities in our time of madness, or what many might think is a state of bondage, characterized by corrupt, incompetent, mendacious, older leadership. The Bible tells us that Moses feared taking on the role of leader. He reluctantly took it on at the behest and direction of an ineffable but mighty God. Why me? He asks of God. What can I do? What words can I use? Why will these people follow me? Mamdani, despite or because of his age, has no doubts about his ability to lead. We don't really know what Moses looked like, although we can imagine his face and stature through paintings and sculpture, inspired imaginative iterations over the centuries, and this is by an American sculptor by the name of William Zorak. Mamdani we know, and now famously on the cover of the New Yorker. He's almost always in the same black suit, ever confident and calm, frequently smiling, trying to lead the people of the city out of its wilderness of mismanagement and tensions among its diverse peoples. What is clear is that he is a young leader who both inspires many and frightens many. If we are wise, we will look to courageous and mature leaders such as Moses and bet, and it will be a bet with huge consequences, on a young leader such as Mamdani to fulfill the promise of wise, responsible leadership. And if we are lucky, we will find among you, and in institutions like Wellesley, many leaders in the making who aspire to strong and constructive leadership by sustaining democracy based on economic, social, gender, and cultural equity. Leadership requires adaptation to working in the worlds of social media and AI. But positive leadership also requires actual personal and group interactions that uplift and sustain the best of human concerns, needs, feelings, and aspirations. And this is something I think that you have experienced in your collective work in the last 2 weeks. As an historian, let me suggest that leadership also requires knowledge of great leaders in the past. And in the American context, that would be Abraham Lincoln, Franklin Roosevelt, Martin Luther King, and John Lewis. And not just men. We may look as well to leaders such as Harriet Tubman, Martha Coffin Wright, and Frances Stewart, great abolitionists and feminist leaders, and the subject of a wonderful book called The Agitators, 3 friends who fought for abolition and women's rights, by an historian by the name of Dorothy Wickenden. There are aliens in the ever-encompassing AI world, as Snyder told us. But I believe and hope you believe that you will meet the formidable challenges of change. One must have confidence and expectations, and this is not easy. You are engaged in an education that is giving you skills and values to negotiate a fulfilling future, despite the fact that your generation may have been robbed or deprived of many of the formative skills for making rich personal connections and distinguishing between falsehoods and reality, especially in the digital world. The work takes time, and it cannot be done in quick hits, engineered by algorithms. The work is the slow building of trust and personal interactions with people and not aliens, not the mechanical or artificial iterations of thoughts and relationships that mimic and exploit emotions, especially fear and violence, and false connections. It may be that the most urgent challenge for leadership today is to help people overcome what one high school teacher in California calls, and I quote, a creeping sense of nihilism towards reality and confusion among screenagers over what is real and fake. In closing, let me share some poignant observations by Oliver Sacks, a renowned psychiatrist and author. His thoughts are suffused with the real in attempting to understand psychological reality and unreality. He published an article in the New York Times about his diagnosis of terminal cancer and his intention to live the few months allotted to him in a rich way. Quote, over the last few days, I've been able to see my life as from a great altitude, as a sort of a landscape, and with a deepening sense of the connection of all its parts. He continued to express gratitude for all he had experienced and brought, and all that was brought into his mind for consideration at this crucial moment when he was dying. And he wrote, I have had intercourse with the world, the special intercourse of writers and readers. Above all, I have been a sentient being, a thinking animal on this beautiful planet, and that in and of itself has been an enormous privilege and adventure. He is grateful to so much, to palpable, essential connections that enable human beings like him to think and to absorb ideas, have adventures, see beauty, have relationships, and care about and learn from others. Our responsibility is to look for and create that landscape of leadership by reaching out to others through the best qualities that make us human. Thank you. Any questions? Which I probably can't answer.
Thank you so much for your talk. I'm coming from an art history background, so I'm curious, sort of from a historian's perspective. I think that the difficulty of understanding what is real and what is fake in AI is like something that is so like massive and insane right now, but it's not entirely unprecedented. Like I'm thinking about examples of propaganda in like coming from like the Soviet Union or the United States during the Cold War, or even propaganda, like media propaganda in the time of Nazi Germany. So I'm curious, like, what parallels you see between like propaganda in media and AI today, versus what sort of differences AI has brought to the
Well, I guess I should go back. But as an art historian, you're also dealing in the imaginary world, because think about all of the imagery of Christianity, or imagery in Buddhism, or imagery in Islam, the vegetation which connotes the power of God. I mean, that's all an imaginative leap. And often in the best of intents, which in fact magnify our capacity to think and understand and enjoy beauty and sorrow and the things that run through our lives. As far as the propaganda is concerned, the Germans were like children dealing with the tool compared to what AI and social media can do. I mean, people don't know what is real and what is not. This is absolutely devastating to us. And AI, the businesses of AI don't care. The business is to make more money. And so at what point will we begin to put brakes upon ourselves so that we can, in fact, distinguish reality from madness, manipulation from leadership? I mean, but there are age-old problems that human beings have faced, but I think the communications, the world of communications today is so fast, and I think there's something that is deeply addictive about social media. There's something that somehow people are investing who they are. They're looking for reflections of acceptance, of approval, of what to do. And it's based upon something that is being manipulated, and somehow then you think it empowers you. I mean, I'm convinced that Trump's power, I mean, he's a born dictator. I mean, he's finally got the opportunity. First, he was just a crappy real estate lawyer who made really disgusting deals. I mean, he really was. He was just common, forgive me, New York real estate dealer. Nobody liked dealing with him. But his ambitions were very great, and his capacity for corruption is enormous, and his hunger to have power is terrific. But somehow, because of his success, because of his confidence, because of his gross qualities, he speaks to a lot of people. And they feel a personal connection. They feel through, when he goes on social media, that he's talking to them. And therefore, they are empowered by his power over them. So it's our own sense of insufficiency and vulnerability which enables us to somehow buy into it. And he's doing for the most cruel and corruptive and racist and misogynist. I mean, he's got, there's not, you think there's nothing more he can surprise us with. Well, then he says, we're going to indict Jerome Powell and take down the Federal Reserve System. And then we're going to take Greenland. Why? Because he wants it. It's his real estate. He says, that's a body of land, I want it. I'm going to get it. And then he says, Ukraine can go. I mean, he's into smashing because power really feeds him. And because of the nature of communication, it also infeeds other people. And he's able to manipulate and to switch. He can say one thing one day and one thing the next day, but that's perfectly fine because the medium is so fast. And it's yours. I mean, to some extent, you're really engaged with it. And to become disciplined over it is an enormous challenge. And one that we, my generation, Winnie's generation, have thrust upon you. And we've sort of said, you handle it. We're not going to be around much longer, so it's yours. That's not fair. But you're also up to it. And you have to be up to it because you have to save what we are taking close to the edge.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. This was really such a beautiful talk, and I think that you've really hit some points that a lot of us have been discussing throughout this fellowship, and I think just like across our community at Wellesley.
Something that I've heard a lot within people from our generation, not as much at Wellesley, but kind of within the broader community, is that AI is this tool that they use within their own lives for the sake of optimization, right? They have their ChatGPT premium subscriptions because they want to be able to like optimize their work and work more efficiently and whatnot. And to me, I think what that speaks to is this interest in profit in some respect, not necessarily like profit in like a monetary sense, but like just sheer optimization over, this desire to like experience life to its fullest by yourself and autonomously. And I was having this conversation with somebody where I was like, look, like you're paying $20 a month to basically not have to do anything for yourself anymore. You're like ceding control in so many ways. You're thinking about optimization over anything else. And they said to me, like, well, our job as humans is to optimize. What we want as humans is to optimize. Think about all of the innovation that's come up until this point. Is that not just optimization? When we look at our societies, when we look at our infrastructure, is it not just all about optimization? And I wasn't really sure what to say, because to me, like, no, like that's not the point of being around. That's not the point of innovation. It's to, make life better for a a broader number of people, not to optimize things for ourselves. I think in so many ways that speaks to AI really destroying the fabric of our societies and of our humanity, because it, I think in so many ways can be used to, I guess, really focus in on what you can do as an individual for yourself rather than what you can do as an individual for a broader collective. But I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little bit, because there has been this historic premise to optimize, to drive innovation and drive capital and gain as much as we can for ourselves. And I think that what we're seeing with the rise of AI, I mean, as Elle mentioned, is really a continuity in a lot of ways of things that have been present over time. And like maybe this is just like the trajectory of a neoliberal society where all of a sudden it's like really being condensed into this just really, really, I don't know, scary and unpredictable technology that we don't really know how to regulate. But I don't know, I guess that was a really long-winded way of asking, I guess, what do you do when somebody says that our lives are about optimization, not about everything else, right? I mean, the quote that you said about a butterfly not being affected by artificial intelligence, I agree with you, but other people don't necessarily care about the butterfly. Other people don't necessarily care about like the color of the sky or the experience of, I don't know, seeing beauty in the world around them if it means they can optimize. What are your thoughts? I don't know.
I mean, we're torn. We're torn between the capacity for greatness and for beauty and for belief and for goodness and for social justice. And then there are many who are also interested in individual power, no matter what, corrupt practices. I mean, we're very divided, and I must say, you're coming to maturity at a juncture. What's happening right now is really unprecedented in this country, except for the Civil War. You're seeing all the basic attempts for decency, however much they have been perverted and ignored, and particularly in terms of race. You're seeing all of that torn down and pulled apart in a way that is shocking, absolutely shocking. So if you feel that the world is really shaky and ugly, not only because of AI, but because we're seeing such corruption, we're seeing such greed, you're right. And you should be angry at us for delivering this to you. at this extreme level. But we've been there before. And hopefully we will have sufficient strength and a sense of what is right to put a stop to it. But we don't know. We don't know. But you can do it in your own personal life. And I think you should never apologize for thinking about what are real emotions and real qualities and the things that make humans special. And that is the capacity to perceive, to think, to care, to interact, to feel, to be hurt. Does AI get hurt? I don't know. I don't believe it. That's for certain. I mean, it's all just part of the human experience. And whether we have sufficient strength to write the course, I don't know. I don't know. But it's certainly in your hands. And you just got to believe it and do it, and I hope the rest of us get our acts together soon enough, I think. I don't know whether that's an answer. Yeah.
Again, thank you so much for speaking to us today. It's been really, really inspiring, and I think it means a lot to us to hear you talk about this very important matter to us. I want to piggyback on what Ananya said, which made me think of something I remember from a documentary, which is the movie director Kubrick talking about one of his film, Clockwork Orange. I've never watched the movie, but there is a lot of very explicit violence content in it, and people or the society have criticized him for accusing that movie led to more violence in society, and he replied to that comment. I'm not saying that I agree with him, but this is what he said. He replied to that by saying that there is already violence in the society before I made the movie. And whether if I made it or not, there will always be, there have been violence in society and there will be violence in society, which made me think of how before AI was invented and happened so advanced, we are already in a society that is so driven by capital and efficiency. And it makes me think of AI was created because it was very profit driven, and it finds information from the internet, and a lot of the information that it produces extremely biased. So if you ask AI its opinion on human race, gender, the answer is often very misogynistic, and it's exactly because that it's learning information from the internet, and the internet is biased. So I'm thinking a lot of the issues that AI is exposing to us, a lot of it stems from the prejudice, bias, violence, and conflict that already exists in human society, and it's a very powerful tool with a lot of potential huge negative impact that will really magnify what is already in our society. So I'm really curious to hear your thought of how is there any way that we can implement more awareness and education in our social system for us to be able to recognize that kind of pattern and to understand how it works in our human cognition and in our social systems.
It's an ongoing battle, and it's a battle that's been waged going back to Moses. I mean, the Ten Commandments and the laws that were handed down, and said they were handed down, was an attempt to create limits on that violence, and also to create sufficient principles of caring for others so that you couldn't use violence to destroy others. So it's the perennial challenge. It's the perennial challenge of Christianity. It's the perennial challenge of Buddhism and Islam. I mean, all the great religions take this on. How do you tame the human being? And we're not doing very well. But we also, I think, live in a world, or we did live in a world, of illusions. For example, if you take American history, America, up until the 1960s, was essentially part democratic and part totalitarian. The South essentially was a totalitarian state as far as American blacks were concerned. They had no rights, they couldn't vote, they couldn't defend themselves, they were subject to violence whenever it was the whim of those who had power. And it was built into the system that blacks were inferior and had no way to escape or to have dignity or capacity to be like whites. And that was the case in America up until the 1960s. What we're dealing with now is the backlash against the attempts to tear down that system. And the country doesn't like it, unfortunately. It's terrible. And it's preyed upon by fear and violence and old habits. And now it's turned, well, you know what Trump has done with DEI, but the ferocity of the campaign against immigrants, I mean, just sheer violence. I mean, he's got ICE. ICE is the American equivalent of the stormtroopers in Germany. They could do anything. They were the tool of those in power. And they just were on the street. There it was Jews. Here it's immigrants and blacks or anybody else, including this poor woman who tried to intervene. And she got it. And they will lie about it. But they are building upon a whole reservoir of prejudice and fear and impotence and the fact that we have not engaged in sufficient education and civic responsibility to say, this is wrong. So we've just got to keep working on it. We just have to keep trying. You can't let them win. And it's hard. It's loud. I mean, it really stinks. I mean, this is a shit show. I mean, this is really bad. But it is bad, but it's also clear. And you have enough education and strength and building community together to support each other and say that this is wrong and we won't let it happen. I think. I wish our generation, Winnie, was stronger in that respect. We lived in a world of illusion. We thought we won the Second World War, democracy, it's the end of genocide, all of this kind of business. Everything was going to be fine. One more, sure.
Hi. So my name is Aisha, and I'm sorry I entered in your meeting late. I had to a little emergency, but I was so involved and I was so excited for this. One point that came out to me a lot was one that technology has allowed us to deepen so much or contact and knowledge about things, but has also separated, like isolated us so much from it all. As a migrant in this country, I first came in this country in 2020 through a U.S. Initiative called Youth Ambassadors. Actually, we have another Youth Ambassadors here, which is my little, Noeli. And we have had a legacy of other Youth Ambassadors here in the school in Wellesley. And it is truly a blessing because we got to come here entirely paid by the U.S. government from public schools to learn about American culture, to talk about Brazilian culture, and do the same when we're back. And that created, at least in me, instilled this utter desire to contribute and to be in here. I had never even thought about coming to college before. So I ended up here, and I was so excited because it was the turn of something so beautiful and so new. And then cut to me on my senior year, scrolling on Instagram yesterday and finding the president calling me a thug, along with the past Brazilians in Wellesley, along with a lot of people in this room. And it's just very sad to see this rise in nativism. And I have screened you a lot because you have some amazing work, especially on the politics of ethnic pressure. It's something that I really want to read soon, which for context is on the immigration situation for Jews arriving in the U.S. like around 1910s, and I thought it was super interesting because I feel it's like at the same time it allows me to be so locked in 15 different videos of ICE taking people like me in the streets. It also allows me to just circle on another tag and spend 2 hours watching cooking videos that have nothing to do with it, just to ease my mind from everything. And then suddenly I'm stuck again on, I am so powerless, I am so powerless. And one of the main points that, here in Wellesley, I think it's important is that we have this strong sense of leadership being spread around everywhere. We have Albright Institute, but we also have inside the classroom, students have so much access to using their voices. And I feel that all the time, I'm a ministerial peer leader. I'm able to engage with students who are doing civic action here in campus, and it's amazing. But I feel that all the time we're trying so much to instill this leadership, feeling, instinct. But we're not really opening the field for these individuals to take action. So they are full of ideals, but it keeps being pushed forward to, in your career, eventually you become an ambassador, you become a lawyer, you become a doctor, and then you will do something. And I wanted to know, I wanted to have a little bit of your opinion on how do we foster this action, especially when we're talking about a majority of a campus that has been born in this country, has a lot of privileges, which sincerely should not be called privileges. These are just rights. To be in this country and, defend it, because that's a reality of the moment that we're living on. And how do we foster this sense of action beyond leadership, of immediate action in students?
Forgive me, I can't speak for Wellesley. But I can say that that being in a program like this should give you the confidence and should give you the sense that there are others who are concerned as you are. And you build the friendship, you build the trust, you build the sense of who will really move ahead and who needs support. And you stick with it. And that's what you, I think, have made over these 2 weeks. And so it's a real treasure. It's a real valuable thing. And don't let it go. That's what I would say.
Please join me in thanking Judith Goldstein. Thank you so much.